When I'm in that church, I feel like, yeah, her spirit lives within me. When I go to Pyrites nowadays and just stand there and think about what happened, I stand on the bridge that went to the island where the boarding house was that Catherine and Rose ran. Yeah, I do. I feel her in me, you know? She tells me, keep writing, Roxanne.
From NCPR, welcome to Northwards. People, ideas, and conversations from and about Northern New York, Vermont, and beyond. I'm Mitch Teich.
Support for the Northwards podcast comes from the J.C. Steiniger and M.E. McDonald Charitable Fund at Adirondack Foundation, in support of the Adirondack Foundation, building stronger Adirondack communities.
All right, question for you. Have you been to the hamlet of Pyrites, New York, lately? There's not much there these days. A few hundred people call it home. There's a volunteer fire department, a hydro plant on the Grass River. But if you go far enough back in the St. Lawrence County woods, I'm told you can see some of the evidence of the heyday of Pyrites 100 years ago when it was a booming paper mill town. I have never actually done that, but after reading Roxanne Boysik's new novel, I kind of like to go in search of that history. Maybe you would too. The novel is called Catherine's Dream, and it's based on some of the life of Roxanne's grandmother, who grew up as a peasant in Poland and immigrated to Pyrites through an arranged marriage. Neither the real-life Catherine nor the fictionalized version of her had an easy life in Poland, and they didn't find an easy life in Pyrites either. But what they did find there would surprise anyone who drives through town today. A bustling place with hundreds of workers, plenty of debauchery, and some Prohibition-era rum running. I know, right? Pyrites? Roxanne Boysik's life has been a pretty interesting one as well. She has driven a school bus, she's taught other school bus drivers, run a NASCAR-themed store, returned to college in her 40s, and now has her first published novel. And she has made the trip up from Syracuse to tell her story and her grandmother's story. Thanks so much for coming all this way.
Oh my gosh, Mitch, it was a wonderful trip and a beautiful day, and to talk with you, even better.
Well, so tell us about your grandmother. It was her life that inspired this story, right?
Exactly. You know, I had learned something about my grandmother in the early 2000s. And what it was is my mother has 3 sisters. And the oldest sister, we found out, had a different father. And it was like, what? And come to find out.
We should note, you were a grown-up at this point when you learned
Yes,
this.
I was an adult, yes. And as were many of my cousins who were the children of my mother's sister, believed that my grandfather was their grandfather.
Sure. So this was a surprise?
Yeah, a little bit of a surprise. And then come to find out, we always knew that my grandmother came in the steerage of the ship and through Ellis Island. But what I didn't know is she came under an arranged marriage. And she ended up in this paper mill town called Pyrites.
Which is really interesting. I mean, you think about, we think about immigration in the first part of the 20th century, people going through Ellis Island, and so many of them end up in New York City or Chicago or, a large urban environment. But your grandmother somehow ended up in Pyrites?
Yes, exactly. And that's what fascinated me. But more to that was what happened to my grandmother in Pyrites. And at the time, in 2005, I had started going back to school, to college. And the college had a library with microfiche because although there was the internet, it isn't like what it is today. Mm-hmm. So I went in there and I looked up the time period and what happened, and I was like, I've got to write this story.
You were looking at old newspapers?
Yes, old newspapers, yep.
Did you know your grandmother growing up?
I did. She passed away when I was 12.
Okay. So these were not stories that she told, or not stories that she told you, certainly.
Correct.
Let's give people at least a framework for your novel. We know that, as you say, it's called Catherine's Dream. Catherine's life is based to some degree on your grandmother's life. Without giving too many spoilers away, Catherine Sobel,
yes,
your heroine does not have an easy life. The book opens and she is still actually in Poland at this point.
Yeah, she's in Poland. And at the end of the Great War, or World War I as we know it, So I had a lot of fun just putting myself into that situation. What was it like to be in Poland in 1918? And a lot of research was done through books that were written about that time period.
So tell us about her circumstances. She's growing up kind of on her family's orchard.
Yes, an apple orchard, and they're peasants. And, her family is adamant about, this orchard is your dowry, and you're going to marry the local village farmer, and you're going to have children and create a life here.
And at the same time, she's also working. I mean, she has to work on the farm, but she's also working doing bookkeeping for her uncle.
Yes, her uncle has a bookkeeping business, which is more towards the city, just outside of Krakow. And she is there, and she's forced, I guess you could say, to just enter these numbers and add and subtract. And she doesn't really like it because she likes to use the pencil for other things.
What is the main central dream she has, and what does it have to do with that pencil?
She loves to observe, and she likes to draw. She has this dream of being an artist. It's just her creativity, and it's something she can't control. And as many of us know, when you share your dream with your family, they're not always very supportive. And that's one of the first adversities Catherine faces. Mm-hmm.
So what sets Catherine's life in motion?
So one of the things I like to teach in the book is you've got to be around like-minded people if you want your dream to come true. So, fortunately, in the story, Catherine meets a young man who, like her, also has a dream, and his dream is to create beautiful jewelry for women. However, he is a blacksmith currently, and as in his family is adamant about, no, you're a blacksmith, not a silversmith.
So Catherine finds ways to sneak off with Joseph now and again, but then Joseph has to go away.
Yes, he does. And as you pointed out, many people think, even myself, after the First World War, or the Great War, that there wasn't another war until World War II, but in reality, thousands of people still lost their lives after the Great War. Between Poland and Ukraine were still fighting over their border because Poland was not a country for 123 years. So in 1795, you had Russia, Prussia, which eventually became Germany, and Austria-Hungary hogging.
Right, they kind of partitioned Poland. Yeah.
Poland.
But the people still obviously considered themselves Polish.
Correct. And that's one thing about Polish people. They kept that heritage alive, despite being told by Russia, oh, no, you're not speaking Polish, or Germany.
So Joseph is sent off to fight. He's conscripted into one part of the Polish army. Mm-hmm. And Catherine's brothers, who would have been of the age to do the same, decide that this is not their life.
That's right. They realize now that they're going to be forced to fight in these wars. So they have an uncle who had already gone to America. So they decided, like you said, we're out of here.
And along those lines, this is what ends up allowing Catherine to go to America as well. What are the circumstances under which she ends up in Pyrites, New York, of all places?
Oh, my goodness. So what I found out in my research is these paper mills or even factories in America would send people back to Poland or Germany to recruit people to bring them to America. So Philip on the boat meets one of these recruiters, and that's how he ends up in Pyrites.
So he writes and tells Catherine what?
Like, oh, I found just the man for you. Because in these days, the parents had a lot of say into who their daughters would marry. So as we learned, something will happen with the farm that all of a sudden isn't Catherine's dowry anymore. And she really feels like, what? And now, like you say, Joseph's been sent away. What do I have left? And when her brother writes this letter to say, hey, I've got a guy for you, basically, she's at the point where it's like, well, there's really nothing left for me here in Poland, so I might as well take a risk, because aren't dreams about risks as well?
Yeah.
And she decides to come to America.
But, of course, she gets to America, and we won't give too much away, but finds out that all is not as it seemed in Philip's letters.
Yes, because even in the letters, Leonick had written Catherine to tell her, oh, I'm going to take great care of you. You're going to love it here, kind of thing. Oh, I understand you like to draw and you want to be an artist. Oh, I support that, So Catherine comes to America thinking, okay, this is good.
And then she finds out that her life in America is not any easier than her life was in Poland.
No, it isn't.
Turns out the streets are not paved in gold.
Exactly. And the culture shock of America, even how it had changed her brother in the short time he had been gone, the couple years he had been gone.
Let's go back to your grandmother now. What did you find out about what was going on in Pyrites at the time that your grandmother lived there?
Well, it's funny. I grew up, north of Syracuse, and I've heard about paper mill towns, but never realized how Pyrites was this place of a boom town, to basically call it. And
it is not a boom town now.
No. This paper mill employed, over 800 workers, many of them immigrants. And on top of that, there were grocery stores and barber shops and pool halls and hotels. And, I'm sure things went on in those hotels. And just the fact that my grandmother was in this place, it just fascinated me. Because although Pyrites had all of these things, the one thing it didn't have was law, meaning no police. And now we're in Prohibition, so we had to incorporate that into the story as well.
You were talking when you got here before we turned on the tape or the digital tape about the drive up here and thinking about it in terms of what your grandmother would have seen on the train north from Syracuse.
Right, and as I travel up Route 11 to Canton north, you can see some of the older farmhouses, and the farms, and just how primitive it was up here. There was so much woods and logs, and that's what fueled the paper mills, not only Pyrites, but Rensselaer Falls, different ones. And what was interesting is in 1930, this Pyrites paper mill shut down because, a lot of them had used up all the wood, and wood was being shipped from Canada, which was expensive. And, now, of course, Depression's coming and all of that.
Right, so we're really talking about a place whose heyday was 90 years ago.
Exactly.
Let's talk about your journey to becoming a writer.
Okay.
This has been a career change for you.
Yes, it has. I'd always enjoyed writing. Like in different jobs I've had, I'd done newsletters or, website content.
I know you wrote a blog when you went back to school, right?
Right. And going back to college at age 44, I wrote a lot of papers. So I wanted to build my career as an author because I found how much I love I've always been creative. So to tell a story and create it from a place where I've never lived, I just love that idea.
Do you feel like, is there a parallel between Catherine's dream of being an artist and your dream of being a published writer?
Yeah, you could say that. Yes, because, or even myself. In the book, until Catherine's mindset changes, her life isn't going to change. If you think, oh, I'm a victim, woe is me, this is my lot in life, then that's what you're going to get, right? So you have to kind of take the risks that, like Catherine does, and really think about what it is you really want. What is it you really want? And be around the right people who appear in her life, and she recognizes that. That's the other key.
It must have felt like a huge risk to go to college at 44.
Yeah, it was because especially raising a family, working, so it wasn't easy. But it's funny when you're living your dreams. Like my dream was to have a college degree so I could be more of a credible writer. The doors open. And that's what happened to me when I was going to Syracuse University. The doors just kept opening for me. And so, I don't know, I'm just so grateful for that.
Talk about what some of the doors were.
Oh, my goodness. When I was going to college, I wasn't afraid to go in and read the bulletin boards, that were on the wall. And if there was I liked writing. So there was television writing and radio clubs. And I just joined the clubs like any other college student. And it was funny when I would often be waiting outside before the professor got there, and the students would look at me and go, "Are you the professor?" "Oh, no, not me." Maybe one day.
Did people, your fellow students, look at you funny when you would show up for radio club or television writing courses or whatever?
Well, because I had a background in school bus driving, and I had, driven K through 12, I got along well with young people. So I found it comfortable to interact with them, and they were comfortable around me.
You were not just a school bus driver, right? You were a school bus master instructor.
Yes, I became a school bus driver master instructor because many people don't know school bus drivers need classroom training in New York State. Twice a year they have what's called a refresher. So, and people who teach the refreshers need to be certified. So I became certified.
What was I realize this is getting kind of far from Catherine's dream, but what was the hardest part of driving a school bus or teaching others to drive school buses?
Well, one thing for sure is holding their attention in the classroom, because many of them, they're, I'll use the word forced to be there. But unlike myself, who went to school on my own wanting to go, many people don't want to be in the classroom, especially, I've got more important things to do in between my runs or my day off than be in a classroom. So learning how to hold their attention, I think. And that's what helped me with my writing. Because when I wrote this story, I wanted to hold people's attention throughout the book. I didn't want them to flip through, like, okay, skip this part,
I mean, this is a strange question because you had to love Catherine a lot to put her in this story. Mm-hmm. Did you worry about how much was piling up on her? I mean, it must have been hard to put down on paper all the bad things that happened throughout the first, 25 years of her life.
Right. So you mean to put her into the position?
Yeah, because as the writer, you're kind of you're the god of this story. Mm-hmm. And was it ever hard to sit down and write the bad things that were happening to her?
Well, I don't know if it was hard because, like I say, I enjoy. Not that I enjoy somebody living in adversity, but I enjoy just challenging myself to do it in a way that wasn't like the whole book isn't like, oh, geez, down.
No, of course not.
So you had to give her positive, upbeat things that happened to keep pulling her forward towards her dream,
Well, and I assume you went into this already knowing how it was going to turn out.
Oh, yes. So before I wrote the story, I did outline it. And I worked with a writing coach, which was very helpful because in a novel, you have, your character arc, your story arc.
Who was the hardest character for you to kind of get to know?
Let's see. That's really a good question. I mean, of course, other than my grandmother, I would say the character of Leonic, the one who she'll end up marrying in America. And just to get in his head, the kind of person, his background, or even Rose, her sister-in-law, just the characters, their lives in early America.
How did your grandmother's life turn out?
Well, in real life, she had more adversities. It's funny. One of the most common questions I get asked is which part of the story is true and which isn't. So the true part is what happens in Pyrites. The part about where she has a lost love and there's a special necklace in the story, and how her life turns out in America, that's not really true.
Sure. One of the other little details that's interesting in this story is the pendant, the necklace and pendant that Catherine's lost love, Joseph, has made for her. And we won't say anything more about where it shows up in the story, but the necklace and the pendant are represented in what you actually are wearing around your neck as we're having this conversation. How did that necklace come to be?
Well, when I was going to college part-time, when I was done, I got my college ring. And each day I wear this, it reminded me of what I'm capable of. So in my grandmother's original wedding picture, she has a necklace on. And I thought, how can I incorporate that necklace into the story? And at the same time, I wanted women to be able to wear it to know I can accomplish anything I put my mind to, which Catherine had to do. You know, she had to trust other people were there to help her and know what she wanted.
Is this necklace actually taken from the design that what your grandmother wore?
No, actually, I designed the necklace based
Really?
on, what Joseph was looking for when he said, I want something that represents, like a friendship with no end. And I made it heart-shaped because, the love that they had between them. And then the Baltic amber, that's the stone, was a story I learned. I loved incorporating the Polish folklore.
Folktales, right, exactly.
Into the story.
So you were not just a writer and not just a school bus driver and a school bus driving instructor and all of these other things. You were also a jewelry designer?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, go figure, right? And,
you were truly a Renaissance woman.
It's funny, when I originally wanted the necklace, because I knew I wanted the necklace on the spine and in the story, I first looked at like Amazon or something looking for a necklace similar to the design, but I realized, so I went to a local jeweler, Jewelry on James in Syracuse, and I shared with him the story. And he said to me, Roxanne, why don't you design the necklace and I'll make the mold and then we'll have it as people want it. And it's real silver and a real silver chain and it's very quality.
It must have been incredible to have written this story and then see an item from the story come to life in front of you.
Exactly. I had no clue that I was going to design the necklace, So that's really, yeah, you're right. I never thought of it that way.
Are you working on other fiction now?
Yes, I am. So, ironically, I have letters from Poland that were written to my grandfather. Obviously, Leonik was not my grandfather.
Sure.
Okay, my mother's father. Over 120 letters from 9 different people. They were written in the 60s. And you see the side from Poland, but you don't see what my grandfather wrote back. So at the Polish home in Syracuse, I met a woman, Marta, and she translated the letters for me, generalized them because, to translate them word for word would be difficult. But she actually took some of the letters to Poland to translate. She goes there every summer to visit her parents with her family. And she said to me, Roxanne, my mother does not like soap operas, but every day she would be like, get those letters out. We got to know what happened. So that's what's told me. There's another story there. So,
are we going to hear more from of Catherine's life?
Well, I'm not sure if I'll incorporate this somehow into like a sequel.
Right.
But I'll know more after I dig in a little bit because many people do want a sequel to Catherine. However, the sequel to the current book, Catherine's Dream, would totally probably be made up.
So do you feel like your grandmother is alive in your mind in a way that she maybe wasn't until you started writing this book?
Yes, because I started actually going back to church, the Sacred Heart Church that I talk about in the story. So I'm a member there now. So, right, when I'm in that church, I feel like, yeah, her spirit lives within me. When I come here to Canton, when I go to Pyrites nowadays and just stand there and think about what happened. I stand on the bridge that went to the island where the boarding house was that Catherine and Rose ran. And yeah, I do. I feel her in me, She tells me, keep writing, Roxanne.
So when you think about, say, the last 25 years and think about where you were before you went back to college, before you decided to write this novel, and now think about the book that's actually physically on the console in front of you. How do you think about what it's taught you about yourself?
It's taught me that if you really want to do something, you just have to do it. You have to take those little steps. When COVID happened, and I always had these stories, but there was always an excuse not to write them. Okay, I got to work. Oh, okay, I got to do this. But when you actually say, no, I want to really do this, and you set your mind to it, and you just keep taking those steps, and pretty soon you're at the top of the mountain. You made it. So it's just been an incredible journey. And I'm very grateful, and I appreciate the support of my husband, who has been my biggest cheerleader during all this. So,
if you could either go back in time or your grandmother could teleport to the current time, what would you want to ask her?
I often wonder how surprised even anyone who lived at that time period would be of the way we live now. So many conveniences, right? I guess I would really want to ask her the true story of what was her life like in Poland. What was it really like? Just amazing journey for me.
Yeah. Well, Roxanne Boysick, thank you for sharing that amazing journey with us.
Oh, well, you're welcome. And thank you for taking an interest in the story. And I hope people will read it and be inspired to live their dreams.
Roxanne Boysick's new novel, set in Poland and in Pyrites, New York, and based on her grandmother's experiences, is called Catherine's Dream. Boysick lives in Syracuse, and at ncpr.org/northwards, you can find out more about the book, see a photo of the real-life Catherine, and find a link to download a free digital edition. That is all for this edition of Northwards. Before you go in search of your own family history, though, here is Ethan Shanty to share the podcast family tree.
Northwards is an NCPR podcast production. The show is written, edited, and produced by Mitch Tyke with digital production supervision by me, Ethan Shanty. Caitlin Kelly handles our social media, Bill Hanel is our digital director, and Doyle Dean is our production manager. Music is by the Wickmore Jazz Trio of Plattsburgh. To support this show and find more podcasts, visit ncpr.org. This is NCPR, North Country Public Radio.